A pristine marble hallway echoes with hurried footsteps. A young woman tears, streaking her cheeks, clutches her rounded belly as she moves with urgency. Behind heavy double doors, a powerful man's voice thunders, threatening to unravel everything she holds dear. Beneath glittering chandeliers and in the looming shadow of a courtroom, their worlds collide. Money, betrayal, and scandal swirl like a storm ready to break. This is the story of a pregnant wife forced to give birth alone. A ruthless millionaire brought to his knees by truth, and the unexpected arrival of twins that changes everything. Hannah Collins was not born into wealth. Her father was a retired mail carrier from Bakersfield, California, and her mother a substitute teacher with a passion for English literature. Hannah grew up respecting the value of $1. She learned early on that life offered no shortcuts. She had her first job at 16, bussing tables at a local diner to save for community college. Her dream was to attend a reputable university, if only she could afford the tuition. At 19, she caught a stroke of luck acceptance to a philanthropic scholarship funded by real-life billionaire Mackenzie Scott. With that scholarship, Hannah transferred to the prestigious Berkeley College, where she studied economics. In the midst of intense assignments and late-night study sessions, she volunteered at campus food drives. Her humility and genuine warmth drew people toward her. She'd always been the listener, in a conversation the person who asked questions about everyone else's aspirations, and rarely spoke of her own. Then came Daniel Mitchell. He wasn't just some affluent student on campus. He was the son of corporate magnate Frederick Mitchell, known for his portfolio of luxurious hotels and real estate ventures along the West Coast. Daniel's arrival at Berkeley created a stir. Newspapers snapped pictures of him driving up in a custom vintage Aston Martin, rumored to cost more than a small house. His father's name opened doors effortlessly. Yet behind the flamboyant displays of wealth, Daniel possessed an undeniable charm. His wit, confidence, and keen business sense made him the most intriguing figure in countless social circles. Hannah and Daniel first met when they were assigned as partners in a macroeconomics project. She was timid, dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, while Daniel breezed in, wearing an impeccably tailored blazer, ignoring the code that most students followed. Hannah braced herself for arrogance, but Daniel flashed an unexpectedly warm smile. He praised her for her precise financial models, and he seemed genuinely interested in her background. Their project meetings extended into coffee dates, then dinners, and eventually late-night walks around campus. For Hannah, it felt like a fairy tale. Shortly after they both graduated, Daniel invited her to a glitzy gala at the Mitchell family's flagship hotel in Los Angeles. It was a surreal experience for Hannah, watching celebrities and CEOs mingle effortlessly. Strobe lights illuminated the floor as the band played. That night, Daniel pulled her aside to a quiet spot on the balcony, overlooking a cityscape of twinkling skyscrapers. He confessed that he had fallen in love with her spirit and sincerity. Before she could fully process his words, he slipped a diamond ring onto her finger, promising a future she had never dared to imagine. Yet that was just the glittering beginning. Marriage to Daniel promised a life of opulence. She believed that together they would be unstoppable. Her conscientious drive combined with his powerful network. Little did she know that beneath the surface of polished floors and expensive suits, old rivalries and dark secrets lurked in corners she couldn't even see yet. Just 6 months into their marriage, Hannah sensed subtle shifts in Daniel's demeanor. Though he still acted loving in public privately, he would lock himself in his study, taking calls Hannah wasn't supposed to overhear. Sometimes at 3 a.m, she would awaken to the glow of his phone illuminating the bedroom, while he texted a contact saved under odd aliases, Investor One Merchant 2, or simply X. If she asked, he'd give a tight smile and say, "Just business." Hannah busied herself with charitable projects. She volunteered at a local women's shelter and championed educational programs for underprivileged girls. Her philanthropic pursuits brought her back to her own humble origins and offered a sense of purpose. She longed to share it with Daniel, but he always brushed off her stories with a curt nod. "We can write a check," he'd say. "Money is faster than you volunteering all day." Hannah would protest that real change required human engagement, a discussion they never quite resolved. Whispers around the Mitchell family gatherings also hinted at tension. Frederick Mitchell, a silver-haired man with an assertive voice, often asked Daniel about the long game for the Mitchell empire. He questioned Hannah's influence over Daniel's focus. Frederick's wife Clarissa regarded Hannah coolly, as if the young woman didn't quite fit in. Daniel's mother avoided open confrontation, but her eyes carried an unmistakable disapproval. One day, Hannah stumbled across a note in Daniel's coat pocket, a scrawled message reading, "We must finalize the deal. No more delays." S. It made her heart pound. Who was S? Was it a woman, a business partner? Anxiety ate at Hannah, but she had no concrete evidence to justify her concerns. Over the next weeks, she convinced herself it must be a typical business transaction. She loved Daniel, and she wanted to trust him. Besides, in the Mitchell circle, secrecy was as common as daily news. Everything was hush-hush until the ink dried on a contract. Still, a gnawing feeling of doubt took root. Hannah had grown up in a family where secrets were frowned upon, and honesty was paramount. Although she told herself Daniel was simply busy, she occasionally spotted unfamiliar phone numbers in his call history, or vague messages about late-night board meetings. With each new sign, her instincts sharpened. She knew something big was brewing behind the gilded doors of their life, and it was bound to crack open. A year into their marriage, Hannah experienced dizzy spells and morning nausea. At first, she assumed it was stress. The tension of married life to a corporate prince had turned her once easygoing days into a whirlwind of social obligations. But after one particularly severe spell, she visited her gynecologist. The blood test and ultrasound confirmed the unexpected news. She was pregnant. A wave of emotions crashed over her: joy, fear, hope, and worry. She wondered how Daniel would react. Their recent interactions had been overshadowed by business calls and overshadowed by his father's constant presence. But she also remembered the tender, passionate man she'd married. Perhaps a child might bring them closer together, bridging the emotional gaps that had formed. Over dinner, she mustered the courage to share the news. Daniel sat at the head of their long mahogany dining table, scanning financial reports. Candlelight flickered across his face. Hannah's heart thudded in her chest as she said, "Daniel, I'm pregnant." She expected a range of emotions, but not the complete stillness that fell over him. For a moment he seemed stunned. Then he burst into a wide grin, scooping her up in a tight embrace. "That's amazing," he whispered. "You've just made me the happiest man alive." For the next few days, Daniel's attention hovered entirely on Hannah and the baby. He even talked about renovating a wing of the house into a nursery, complete with imported furniture and whimsical murals. Hannah, relieved by his reaction, began to breathe easier. She found herself daydreaming about pushing a stroller through city parks, telling bedtime stories, building a family. Yet in the back of her mind, she remembered the mysterious calls, the hushed tones, and the persistent secrecy. As weeks passed, Daniel's initial excitement seemed genuine, but there was something unsettled lurking behind his eyes. Whenever his phone rang late at night, he'd slip out of bed, returning only after he believed Hannah had fallen back asleep. She wasn't sure if the pregnancy had truly softened him, or if it had merely forced him to pause in the middle of some secret crisis. For a while, the joy overshadowed the darkness. Hannah focused on staying healthy, reading baby books, and eagerly awaiting each doctor's appointment. But fate doesn't favor illusions for long. Soon a storm of accusations, hidden deals, and heartbreak would ravage their carefully crafted facade. It began with an early morning phone call from Hannah's friend, Lisa Alvarez, a sharp-eyed reporter for the Los Angeles Tribune. The minute Hannah answered, she heard Lisa's anxious tone. "I'm so sorry you have to find out this way, but my colleagues have a story in the works about Daniel. Something big." Hannah's stomach clenched. What kind of story? There's talk of illegal money funneling through a shell corporation. They're tying it to Daniel. Hannah, the allegations involve offshore accounts, tax evasion. It's massive. He could be indicted if anything is proven. Hannah felt faint. She stumbled to the couch, pressing a hand against her belly. Lisa's voice continued. "I wanted you to know before it hits the headlines. I'm not sure how accurate the details are, but the investigators are from the Department of Justice, so it's serious." When she confronted Daniel after he returned from work, his face turned ashen. He insisted the rumors were false, a smear campaign orchestrated by a business rival. He pulled Hannah into a desperate embrace, promising that his lawyers had the situation under control. "Trust me," he whispered. But Hannah's trust had already begun to fray. As the story gained traction in the media, reporters hounded the Mitchell mansion gates. Every day, tabloids splashed headlines about the Mitchell scandal. The pregnant Hannah couldn't step outside without seeing her husband's name plastered in bold letters across newspapers and websites. She retreated indoors, focusing on her health. Stress made her nauseous, and her once glowing optimism soured into a constant knot of fear in her gut. One evening, Frederick Mitchell appeared at their doorstep with an entourage of advisors. The older man brushed past Hannah with a stiff nod, marching into Daniel's study. She heard angry voices through the thick door, a barrage of shouted words like innocence, liabilities, and family reputation. By midnight, Frederick left with a tight-lipped scowl, ignoring Hannah on his way out. Alone with Daniel, she pleaded, "Please tell me what's happening. I can't bear living in the dark." Daniel avoided her eyes. "I'm handling it, Hannah. There's nothing for you to worry about. Just focus on our baby." Then he shut himself in the study, leaving her there with an impossible swirl of questions. The next day, Daniel arranged for private security to stand guard at the front door, effectively isolating Hannah from the outside world. She was trapped in a gilded cage of rumors and unspoken truths. As Hannah's belly grew, Daniel's presence at home waned. He left the house early, claiming urgent meetings with high-profile attorneys. Entire weekends passed with Hannah alone in the cavernous mansion, the stony hush broken only by the hum of air conditioning or the footsteps of housekeeping staff. She tried to contact Lisa for updates, but her calls went straight to voicemail. On the surface, it looked like the Mitchells had closed ranks, shutting out the press, and Hannah was just another outsider. Weeks turned into months. Hannah's gynecologist, Dr. Valerie Holmes, expressed concern about her patient's elevated blood pressure. Stress was a major factor. Concerned friends offered to visit, but the Mitchell estate security often turned them away, citing orders from Mr. Mitchell. Furious, Hannah confronted Daniel. "Why are you isolating me? I'm not a prisoner here." Daniel's expression hardened with impatience. "I'm protecting you from the paparazzi. Can't you see that they're hungry for any scrap of gossip?" She didn't believe him. The gates might have kept reporters out, but they also locked her in. There were no heartfelt conversations anymore. No gentle morning kisses. Occasionally Daniel would rest his palm on her belly, feeling the baby's movements only to retreat into that unreadable shell. Anxiety overshadowed Hannah's excitement about motherhood. Late at night, she sat by the nursery, imagining the gentle coo of a newborn in her arms. She wondered if Daniel would even be there for the birth. One evening she found an old photo album from their Berkeley days. Turning the pages, she smiled at pictures of them laughing at campus events. How had those sunny, carefree moments turned into this bleak hush? Then by chance, Hannah discovered a hidden folder in Daniel's study. It contained documents about a company named Sterling Ventures. The files mentioned transactions to places like the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, along with legal disclaimers and suspicious invoices. A dizzying swirl of numbers and names scrolled across the pages. Hannah's heart hammered in her chest as she realized that Daniel was far more involved than he'd let on. These weren't rumors. They were evidence. Tears blurred her vision. She now faced a terrifying choice. Confront Daniel with the possibility that he was involved in criminal activity, or remain in this quiet agony, complicit in his silence. The father of her unborn child might be entangled in a major scandal that could lead to prison time. How would she raise a baby under these circumstances when the man she loved wasn't the person she thought he was? The story broke one sweltering July morning. The Los Angeles Tribune published an extensive exposé featuring leaked financial documents implicating Daniel Mitchell and other big names in elaborate tax evasion schemes. The name Sterling Ventures appeared repeatedly, tying Daniel to multi-million-dollar siphoning operations. The media frenzy intensified. Camera crews stationed themselves outside the estate gates, broadcasting around the clock. Hannah woke to the blinding glare of flashing cameras. Helicopters buzzed overhead, filming live segments for national news. She flipped on the television to see Daniel's face in close-up. A stern news anchor read, "Daniel Mitchell, heir to the Mitchell Hotel's fortune, stands accused of orchestrating offshore schemes to dodge taxes worth tens of millions. Sources say the Justice Department will file charges soon." Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Distant relatives, old acquaintances, and even random strangers on social media demanded explanations. Hannah's mind reeled. Fear for Daniel's future warred with her sense of betrayal. For a moment, she believed Daniel might have a valid explanation, an elaborate setup, a smear campaign. But the files she found in his study told a different story. Daniel arrived home that night, exhausted, his tie askew. He looked at her with wounded eyes. "Hannah, they're wrong. I can beat these charges. My lawyers will prove there's no case." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she brought the hidden documents from his study and laid them before him. "What is this, Daniel? Why do these show the exact same illegal transactions the media is talking about?" He flinched. "You were snooping. Snooping. I'm your wife. You've locked me in this house with your secrets." Cornered and weary, Daniel finally admitted that the finances were complicated. He claimed half of it was Frederick's doing, that Sterling Ventures was a dummy corporation created by his father to move money discreetly. They used my name to keep it off his direct records. I didn't know how deep it went until recently, Hannah. Her world reeled. Was Daniel a victim or a willing participant covering his father's tracks? She tried to glean the truth through his tearful pleas, but something felt off. That night they lay in bed, silently, the space between them too wide for any whispered endearments. Hannah couldn't sleep, consumed by dread of what would happen if Daniel was indicted and how a baby fit into this disintegrating picture. Days later, Frederick Mitchell summoned Daniel and Hannah to a quiet meeting at the Mitchell corporate headquarters in downtown Los Angeles. The steel and glass building overlooked a sea of skyscrapers. Photographers swarmed the sidewalk, but security quickly ushered them into a private elevator up to Frederick's executive suite. Frederick sat behind a massive desk, flanked by attorneys and corporate advisors. His gaze fell upon Hannah's pregnant figure, then flickered away as though her presence was an inconvenience. "We need to protect the family name," he began, steepling his fingers. "This fiasco has tarnished our reputation. I've arranged a strategic plan with our legal team." He proceeded to outline a spin campaign painting Daniel as a victim of unscrupulous accountants, the scapegoat for complicated financial channels that Frederick's CFO had allegedly orchestrated. Hannah bristled. They were planning to manipulate the narrative, pinning the blame on a faceless CFO. What if that man was innocent too? Frederick's voice was cool, unyielding. "We have to release a public statement soon, clarifying Daniel's position. You, Hannah, will have to appear by his side and confirm that your husband had no knowledge of the shady deals." "Understand?" Hannah's throat constricted. She saw Daniel shift uncomfortably in his chair, but he said nothing. Did he want her to lie for him? For Frederick? She wanted to stand up for her own integrity. But she was alone in a room full of men in suits, her belly visibly heavy with child feeling more trapped than ever. Her mind raced. Was she truly expected to risk her own moral compass to salvage the Mitchell name? When she hesitated, Frederick narrowed his eyes. "We all have much to lose, my dear. I trust you're loyal to your husband and to this family." The cold threat in his tone was unmistakable. Out in the corridor, Hannah confronted Daniel. "What about that CFO? Do we know he actually set this up?" Daniel didn't meet her eyes. "This is bigger than us, Hannah. We need to do whatever it takes." The betrayal stung. The man she loved was either too terrified or too complicit to speak the truth. Hannah, reeling, realized that Daniel might be willing to sacrifice anyone for his own skin. She recalled the vow she made on her wedding day to stand by Daniel in sickness and health. But no one had warned her about moral sickness, about complicity in potential crimes. That vow had never felt so tenuous. The following week played out like a surreal drama. Newspapers bellowed new allegations daily. Additional offshore accounts, hidden real estate deals, hush money payouts. Hannah found it difficult to discern fact from speculation. Frederick's PR team churned out statements portraying Daniel as a naive pawn manipulated by cunning financiers. Some media outlets bought the narrative. Others dug deeper, fueling suspicion that the Mitchell family was orchestrating a cover-up. On social media, the public's reaction was a mix of outrage and fascination. Hannah's name trended alongside hashtags, labeling her everything from a gold digger to a pitiful victim. Strangers on the internet argued over whether she had knowingly participated in the scheme. Some even speculated her pregnancy was a ploy to garner sympathy. Anxiety festered in her. Each pang of the baby's movement in her womb reminded her that she carried new life, an innocent child thrust into a maelstrom of deception. In her quieter moments, Hannah prayed for clarity, for the strength to see right from wrong in a world she barely recognized anymore. Finally, a bombshell. The Department of Justice filed formal charges against Daniel Mitchell, citing evidence from whistleblowers within Mitchell hotels. A court date was set. Hannah's heart sank at the thought of Daniel standing trial, potentially facing prison. She wrestled with conflicting emotions: love for her husband, anger at his betrayals, fear for her unborn child. And overshadowing it all was a quiet longing for the simpler life she once knew. Despite the chaos, the baby's due date loomed. Hannah's OB/GYN appointments revealed that she was carrying twins, an astonishing revelation. As if one baby wasn't already enough of a revelation, now she had two souls reliant on her choices. She shared the news with Daniel, who was momentarily overjoyed but quickly pulled back into crisis mode with his legal team. "That's incredible, sweetheart," he murmured, phone pressed to his ear. "I'm so sorry, but I have to go." And go he did, leaving Hannah to juggle her pregnancy and nerves alone. The paparazzi's cameras followed her at every turn. She found solace only in fleeting moments, like the gentle hush of early mornings when she felt her twins' kicks and reminded herself there was still a future worth fighting for. The day of the hearing arrived a preliminary session before the main trial. Daniel left early with his lawyer Michael Johnson, a high-powered attorney rumored to have once represented real estate mogul Donald Bren. Hannah, now heavily pregnant, hadn't planned to attend under Daniel's insistence that she stay home to rest. Yet an unshakable intuition told her she needed to be there. Summoning her courage, she hailed a taxi despite the security detail's protests and headed to the courthouse downtown. Outside, protesters clashed with supporters, holding signs reading, "Justice for Mitchell versus Lock Them Up." Police barricades lined the steps. The air was thick with tension. Inside the gallery buzzed with journalists. Hannah slipped into a back row, hoping to remain unnoticed, but cameras quickly spotted her. She tried to focus on the proceedings. The judge read out the charges, and Daniel's lawyer entered a plea of not guilty. As the prosecutor outlined the allegations, Hannah's heart sank under the weight of evidence, detailing shell companies' falsified documents and incriminating emails. Daniel cast furtive glances around the courtroom, but never saw his wife in the back. Frederick Mitchell, seated in a reserved area, stared impassively forward. When the session concluded, Hannah snuck out, tears burning her eyes. She wished she could believe Daniel's innocence, but the facts seemed damning. On the steps, she faced a swarm of cameras. One reporter shoved a microphone into her face. "Hannah, do you think your husband is guilty? Will you testify against him?" Another added, "Is it true you're having twins overwhelmed?" Hannah cradled her belly and pushed through the throng. She barely made it to the taxi, her heart pounding wildly. Once home, she locked herself in the bathroom, tears streaming down her cheeks. She whispered to her unborn babies, "What am I going to do?" Days turned into a blur. Daniel's legal team prepared for the main trial. Frederick hammered out settlements with various parties doing damage control. The family insisted Hannah stay away from all court appearances, citing stress. But a sense of foreboding weighed heavy on her, as though she stood at the cusp of a life-altering decision. She prayed for an epiphany that never came. 2 weeks later, an urgent situation arose. Hannah, 8 months pregnant, awakened in the early morning with sharp pains. Alarmed, she paged Dr. Holmes, who advised her to come to the hospital immediately. Hannah dialed Daniel's phone. No answer. She called again, leaving frantic messages. Finally, she got a text from him, in a critical meeting. "What's happening?" "Heart racing." Hannah typed back that she was having severe contractions and might be in premature labor. Seconds later, Daniel's curt reply flashed, "I can't leave right now. I'll come when I'm done." A cold dread settled over her. She was alone, possibly about to give birth prematurely to twins, and the father was too busy. Summoning what strength she had, Hannah arranged for a ride to the hospital. The doctors confirmed that she was in early labor. Frantic nurses whisked her into a private birthing suite, hooking her to monitors that measured the twins' heartbeats. A swirl of white coats, surgical lights, and the smell of antiseptic overwhelmed her senses. Hours ticked by. The contractions intensified, each wave of pain assaulting her body. Dr. Holmes administered medication to slow labor, hoping to give the twins more time. Exhaustion blurred Hannah's thoughts. She kept glancing at the door, praying Daniel would rush in and comfort her. But he never showed. Alone, she cried out in anguish, gripping the rails of the hospital bed. Memories flooded her mind that night under the stars, when Daniel first told her he loved her, the sparkle in his eyes when he learned she was pregnant. Where had that man gone? Nurses attempted to soothe her, but her heartbreak was too deep. Eventually, the contractions subsided. The medical team decided to keep her hospitalized for observation for fear she might go into full labor any time. Later that evening, she awakened to find an empty chair by her bedside. Daniel had never arrived. Instead, she found a voicemail from him. "I'm sorry. Something came up with Dad. How are you feeling?" The hollow apology stung. In that moment, Hannah realized the emotional gulf between them was too vast. She vowed that if Daniel could abandon her at such a vulnerable time, she would find the strength to survive without him. After 2 days, the doctors stabilized Hannah's condition enough for her to return home, though they warned her to remain on bed rest. She instructed a driver to take her not to the Mitchell estate, but to a modest condominium she had quietly rented in anticipation of the worst. Using money she'd saved from her scholarship days and small inheritance from her late father, she had set aside enough for a security deposit and first few months' rent. It wasn't lavish, just 2 bedrooms and a small kitchen, but it was hers. She left a terse note at the Mitchell house, explaining she needed space for the remainder of her pregnancy. Then she turned off her phone, ignoring the dozens of missed calls from Daniel Frederick and their lawyers. The second she stepped into the condo, she felt a sense of freedom. No imposing gates, no watchful security, no prying family. Here she could refocus on her unborn twins and decide how to move forward. Almost immediately, Hannah discovered how challenging it was to be heavily pregnant and alone in a new place. She had no staff to cater to her every need. Yet she found solace in setting up a makeshift nursery, rummaging through donated baby items from the women's shelter where she volunteered. She hung pastel-colored curtains, assembled a second-hand crib, and even pinned up small sketches. She'd made pictures of a future she hoped would be filled with love, not lies. The physical and emotional strain was intense. Some nights her back pain was so severe she struggled to rise from the couch. Other times, she lay awake, tears sliding silently down her cheeks, wondering if she was doing the right thing. But each time, doubt threatened to overwhelm her. She recalled the moment in the hospital alone in pain, waiting for a husband who never came. That memory hardened her resolve like steel. Finally, she turned her phone back on, bracing for the barrage of messages. One voicemail stood out, Lisa Alvarez, her reporter friend. "Hannah, I know things have been chaotic, but there's something you need to see. Contact me ASAP." Hannah dialed Lisa, breathless with apprehension. Her friend's voice trembled. "I just got a tip. Daniel's going to be charged with new counts. Apparently there's a paper trail showing he personally signed off on several illegal transfers. It's not just about his father. People within Mitchell Hotels are saying Daniel was the mastermind. The prosecutor might call you to testify." Hannah's heart pounded. She realized that if she were subpoenaed, she couldn't lie. She wouldn't lie. The line crackled with tension. "He's the father of my children," she whispered. "But I can't perjure myself." Lisa replied softly, "I'm sorry, Hannah. I really am. Just be prepared." A week later, Hannah felt the familiar pang of contractions much stronger this time. Gasping, she dialed for an ambulance. Within minutes, she was whisked into a paramedic van, sirens wailing through LA's bustling streets. Fear mingled with determination as she told herself, "I can do this. I have to do this." At Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, her world became a blur of sterile corridors, bright lights, and urgent voices. Nurses guided her to a delivery room. She prayed for a safe birth for the twins to come into the world, free from the Mitchell drama. No reporters, no paparazzi, just life in its raw, beautiful essence. Labor hit hard and fast. A swirl of pain, breathing exercises, and final pushes culminated in 2 piercing cries that shattered the tense hush. Her baby boy arrived first, followed by a baby girl, both wailing and alive. Tears of relief and joy streamed down Hannah's cheeks as she held them. Their tiny bodies trembled with each breath, wide eyes looking up at her as if she were their entire universe. She named the boy Aaron, the girl Aurora names she'd secretly cherished for months. In that moment, the chaos of the outside world faded. A wave of profound love swept over her, so powerful that it nearly stole her breath. These 2 fragile beings were hers, and she would protect them fiercely. She stared at their perfect faces, overwhelmed by the fact that Daniel wasn't there. A pang of sadness sliced through her happiness, but she pushed it aside. She was enough. She had to be. When visiting hours came, Lisa dropped by with flowers and a bag of baby clothes. The room filled with warmth and laughter, momentarily distracting Hannah from her uncertain future. She learned that Daniel still hadn't responded to the news of her going into labor. It stung, but she accepted it as reality. The hospital staff adored the twins, cooing over their adorable matching features. Hannah was mesmerized by her children. Everything else, every scandal, every heartbreak, paled in comparison to the miraculous gift of their lives. Yet she knew the world outside that hospital door was a ticking time bomb. Soon she would have to face Daniel Frederick and the courts. For now, though, she allowed herself a fleeting moment of peace in the arms of her newborns. 2 days later, as Hannah was preparing to be discharged, she received a visitor who made her pulse race. Daniel. He showed up unannounced, hair disheveled, his usual polished demeanor replaced with an air of desperation. In his arms he clutched a bouquet of roses. Her heart pounded as he entered the room. For a long moment they both stared at the sleeping twins in their hospital bassinets. Daniel's expression was unreadable, part wonder, part terror. Finally he turned to Hannah. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know you'd gone into labor until it was too late." Hannah steeled herself. "You didn't check your phone. It wasn't that you didn't know. You chose not to come." He exhaled shakily, stepping closer to the bassinets. "They're beautiful." His voice wavered. "Hannah, I need to fix this. The scandal, the legal issues, I'm in too deep. But with you by my side, we stand a better chance of showing the court I'm a family man who made naive mistakes. We can fight these charges together." She stared at him in disbelief. "Are you asking me to lie under oath for you to pretend everything is fine while you dodge accountability?" Daniel's features tightened. "We can position it in a way that doesn't incriminate me further. Just confirm that I've been a loving husband, that I never once mentioned illegal transactions to you. We'll be unstoppable." Rage burned in Hannah's chest. She glanced at the twins, so innocent, then back at Daniel. "I'm not lying. My children deserve a father they can look up to, not a man who manipulates the truth." A flicker of frustration crossed Daniel's face. He looked around as if searching for words that might change her mind. "Think about it. If I go to prison, what happens to you and them? At least if I'm acquitted, you'll have a secure future. We'll have financial stability. I'd rather struggle honestly than live under $1 million lie." She shot back. Fresh tears stung her eyes, but her voice stayed firm. "Leave." Daniel hesitated, heartbreak etched on his face. Then he set the roses on a small table and walked out. The door closed softly behind him, and Hannah's exhausted body sank into the bed. She stared at her sleeping babies, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. She knew this confrontation wouldn't be the last. A fierce maternal instinct welled up inside her. She would protect them from the Mitchell family's darkness, no matter the cost. True to Lisa's warning, a subpoena arrived at Hannah's condominium a week after she brought the twins home. She opened the official envelope with trembling hands, reading that she was required to testify in Daniel's trial, scheduled for the following month. The mere thought of facing him in a public courtroom, forced to expose details of their private life, made her stomach churn. Nevertheless, she felt a strange sense of relief at the possibility of telling the truth. She had lived under a cloak of secrecy for too long. The babies slept in their crib nearby, their tiny chests rising and falling in sweet unison. Hannah steeled herself, vowing that her testimony would be honest, no matter how painful. After all, her children deserved a mother who upheld integrity, even if their father did not. Over the next days, she coordinated with the prosecutor's office, carefully going through every detail. The suspicious documents she found the day Daniel locked himself in his study, his father's demands for a cover-up. She was honest about her limited direct knowledge. No fabricated stories, no exaggerations. The more she recounted, the more she realized the extent of Daniel's deception. The night before the trial, Hannah barely slept. She paced her small living room, hearing the twins stir now and then. Legal counsel had arranged for her to have an escort to the courthouse to avoid the press. That was some relief, but it did nothing to ease the dread twisting her insides. As she rocked Aurora back to sleep, she whispered a silent prayer that truth would prevail no matter the outcome. On a crisp morning, Hannah arrived at the Los Angeles Superior Court. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Microphones and cameras crowded the entrance, but she managed to slip inside through a private side door with the help of courthouse security. Her heels clicked on the marble floors, echoing the accelerating thump of her heart. Inside the courtroom, Daniel sat at the defense table, flanked by his lawyer, Michael Johnson, and another suited associate. He wore a solemn expression, his gaze briefly meeting hers before dropping to the table. Frederick Mitchell also occupied a seat directly behind Daniel, a stoic pillar of paternal support. The trial progressed with opening statements from both sides. The prosecution laid out a detailed timeline of alleged crimes, presenting evidence of money-wiring secret emails and coded memos. The defense tried to discredit the sources of these documents, claiming they were tampered with. Hannah felt her heart pound every time Daniel's name was mentioned. Finally, the bailiff called Hannah Collins to the stand. Her legs felt like jelly as she navigated to the witness box. After being sworn in, she settled into the chair, her eyes flickering to the judge and then to Daniel. He stared at her intently. She wondered if he was silently begging for mercy. The prosecutor began with straightforward questions about their marriage, how they met, and Hannah's living situation. Gradually, the questioning shifted to the critical period when rumors of financial misconduct first surfaced. Hannah answered calmly, detailing the suspicious calls, the documents she stumbled upon the day Frederick demanded her cooperation. Then came a pivotal moment. "Did your husband, Daniel Mitchell, ever explicitly ask you to lie about his involvement or knowledge of these offshore transactions?" A hush fell over the courtroom. Hannah's pulse throbbed in her ears. She recalled the hospital scene, her confrontation with Daniel. Licking her dry lips, she nodded. "Yes." "He asked me to support a narrative implying he was unaware of any illegality. He wanted me to testify that he was an unwitting participant." A murmur rippled through the audience. Reporters scribbled in their notepads. The defense quickly objected, but the judge allowed Hannah's statement to stand. She looked over at Daniel. His face had turned ashen. Frederick stared, daggers at her jaw clenched. The prosecution thanked her, and the defense began cross-examination. Michael Johnson attempted to paint Hannah's testimony as influenced by emotional strain, postpartum stress, and personal conflict. "Isn't it true, Ms. Collins, that you are angry at Mr. Mitchell for neglecting you during pregnancy and used this as a means of retaliation?" Hannah's voice trembled but held firm. "I'm testifying to the truth. I have no desire for revenge. I only want what is right." The cross-examination ended, and Hannah was dismissed. She stepped down, legs shaking, tears brimming in her eyes. The weight of the trial, the hush of the audience, and the knowledge that she had just incriminated the father of her children threatened to overwhelm her. She exited the courtroom, each footstep echoing her newfound resolve and heartbreak. Hours later, the courtroom doors opened again. Hannah sat outside on a wooden bench, hugging herself in an attempt to quell her shivers. Suddenly, she spotted a familiar face, her friend Lisa, carrying little Aaron and Aurora in a double stroller. She had volunteered to watch the twins during Hannah's testimony, but had arrived early to bring the babies back to their mother. Hannah smiled weakly, relieved to see her children safe amidst the chaos. Their bright eyes scanned the courthouse hallway, unaware of the tension swirling around them. As if on cue, Daniel emerged from the courtroom, flanked by his lawyer. His gaze fell upon the stroller. His face went pale. He took a shaky step forward, as though propelled by some paternal instinct. The corridor seemed to freeze. Reporters, attorneys, and bystanders stopped and stared, uncertain what would unfold. Daniel slowly approached, each step laden with visible remorse. He looked at the twins, his son Aaron with a faint tuft of brown hair, and Aurora eyes wide in curiosity. They reached their small hands out, cooing softly. Something inside Daniel cracked. His chest rose and fell in rapid succession. His face contorted. Then, without warning, his knees buckled. He collapsed onto the polished marble floor, unconscious. Gasps echoed across the hallway. Commotion erupted as paramedics stationed at the courthouse rushed to his side, checking his pulse and hooking him up to an IV. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing the dramatic moment. Hannah watched in shock, a tumult of concern and anger swirling. The father of her children lay there, undone by a single glimpse of them. She sensed that Daniel's breakdown was far more than a physical collapse. It was the crushing weight of guilt, fear, and the stark realization of what he stood to lose. Medics revived Daniel within minutes. He blinked, disoriented, then struggled to sit up. His eyes darted around until they landed on Hannah and the stroller. Tears filled his eyes, as if in that fleeting moment he comprehended the magnitude of his choices. Strapped to a gurney, he was wheeled out to an ambulance. The swirling lights of emergency vehicles illuminated the stunned faces of onlookers, marking the crescendo of this surreal day. Daniel's collapse created a media frenzy overshadowing every other development of the trial that day. By evening, cable news channels played a continuous loop of the dramatic footage. Daniel Mitchell, the embattled millionaire, fainting upon seeing his newborn twins in the courthouse. Speculation ran wild. Some pundits claimed it was an act to evoke sympathy from the jury. Others believed it was the final crack in his facade of confidence. From her condominium, Hannah watched the coverage with exhaustion etched across her face. She held the twins close, trying to shield them from the noise blasting through the television. The phone beeped with messages from well-wishers and haters alike. She turned it off, needing peace. Lisa visited that night, bringing homemade lasagna and a warm hug. They sat on the floor, the babies sleeping soundly in their crib, while Lisa recounted the media chatter. "People are divided," she said, softly. "Some think Daniel's a con man, others feel sorry for him. But your testimony, it hit hard. Legal experts say it could seal his fate if the jury believes your account." Hannah swallowed a lump in her throat. She thought about the years she spent genuinely loving Daniel, the father of her children, and the heartbreak that came with betraying her own principles if she lied. "I didn't want it to end this way," she murmured. Lisa placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens, you did what you had to do. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself and for truth." Quiet settled around them. Through the window, city lights glimmered. Hannah gazed at the two sleeping infants, marveling at the delicate rise and fall of their chests. She whispered a silent vow. No matter what chaos the future held, she would nurture these children with every ounce of love and honesty she possessed. The trial stretched on for another week, with new witnesses and financial experts dissecting the labyrinthine structures of Mitchell's business empire. Hannah's attorney advised her to remain on standby, but she was not called back to the stand. She waited anxiously, dreading any phone call that might drag her back into the fray. Finally, the jury retreated to deliberate. On the morning they reconvened, a solemn hush fell over the courtroom. Hannah chose not to attend. Instead, she sat in her living room, the twins in her lap, and watched the live broadcast. Daniel stood as the jury foreman read the verdict, guilty on multiple counts of financial fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. The sentencing would come later, but immediate repercussions included revocation of Daniel's bail, meaning he would be taken into custody. Hannah's heart pounded. She expected to feel relief that justice was served, yet all she felt was a deep ache. She couldn't celebrate Daniel's downfall. He was still the father of her children. The cameras panned to Frederick Mitchell's stricken face, a disbelieving scowl as federal officers handcuffed his son. Daniel went quietly, his gaze distant, as though everything had turned to white noise around him. Then came the final blow. The court footage showed Daniel pausing briefly before leaving the courtroom. He turned to the cameras and whispered a single sentence. "Hannah, please forgive me." The moment was captured by every major network, fueling endless speculation about whether she would stand by him or move on. As Hannah gently patted Aaron's back to soothe him, tears welled in her eyes. She thought about the life they almost had, a marriage built on mutual respect, a father who would have cherished his children. In the end, Daniel's ambition and secrets had destroyed that fragile dream. She kissed Aurora's soft forehead, bracing herself to raise these twins alone. In the weeks following Daniel's conviction, Hannah was flooded with messages from people wanting her story. Book deals, daytime talk shows, tabloid exclusives. She rejected them all. What she craved more than anything was normalcy. She wanted the quiet hum of a stable life where she could provide for her children without feeling hounded by the ghost of Daniel Mitchell. Daniel's legal team filed appeals, but experts predicted little chance of reversal. Frederick Mitchell, meanwhile, faced his own separate inquiry, rumored to be more extensive. Entire factions of the Mitchell empire crumbled. Stock prices plummeted, and employees faced layoffs. Protesters picketed the Mitchell headquarters, demanding accountability. Hannah understood that her testimony had sealed Daniel's fate, but she felt neither pride nor regret. She'd done the only thing she could tell the truth. Now, with her meager savings, she had to plan for a life outside the shadow of the Mitchell name. Through her old contacts at the women's shelter, she received a modest stipend to conduct financial literacy workshops for underprivileged women, an opportunity to utilize her economics degree for something meaningful. It wouldn't make her rich, but it paid the bills. Each morning, she balanced the twins on her hips as she prepared materials determined to rebuild her life step by step. At night, sometimes loneliness gnawed at her. She missed the way Daniel once made her laugh, his gentle touch on her shoulder, his whispered promises. Yet every time she began to soften, an echo of the hospital scene. His absence in her darkest hour stopped her. There was no going back. Months passed, bringing an uneasy sense of closure. Daniel's sentencing day arrived. Hannah, though uncertain if she should be present, felt a moral imperative to witness the final chapter. Securing a babysitter, she made her way to the courthouse. As she entered, a hush fell among reporters who recognized her instantly, but she ignored their questions. Inside the courtroom, Daniel stood before the judge, shoulders hunched. The judge's tone was firm, yet measured a sentence of 8 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 5+ substantial fines and restitution. Silence enveloped the room. Daniel turned slowly, his eyes settling on Hannah in the back row. For a brief moment, a flicker of regret and sorrow passed between them. She thought she saw his lips form the words, "I'm sorry." Then officers led him away. That was it, the end of Daniel Mitchell's free life and the final page of the saga they once shared. Hannah stood quietly leaving the courtroom. Outside, paparazzi shouted for a statement, but she merely walked on the crisp air filling her lungs. She had no more to give to the public spectacle. Her only focus now was on the 2 little lives waiting at home. That evening, as she cradled Aurora and Aaron in her arms, she watched them coo and giggle, oblivious to the turmoil that had upended their lives before they were even born. In their eyes, she found hope, a reminder that every ending carries the seeds of a new beginning. She pressed her lips to their soft cheeks, whispering, "We'll be okay." And so Hannah's journey from a devoted wife to a single mother, forging her own path, highlights the raw power of truth, the cost of deceit, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her children. Despite the betrayal and scandal, her story stands as a testament that even in the darkest storms, resilience can light the way toward a better tomorrow. In the end, Hannah found the courage to protect what mattered most: her integrity, her newborn twins, and her own destiny. Now, standing on the threshold of a new chapter, she faces life with an open heart, ready to embrace the unknown and carve a path guided by honesty and love. If you found this story compelling, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, because every click fuels more stories that inspire, provoke thought, and illuminate the human journey. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.